Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 3 of this week's um, series on basics in modeling in Maya. Uh, in this video, we're going to be modeling a rocket ship. As we discussed in the first video, the rocket ship is going to be made out of several different primitive polygons and added together into a single mesh. So to get started, what we're going to do is we're going to open a new scene. And from here, we're going to start with the body of the rocket. Now, the body was starting with a primitive sphere. And then what we're going to do is we're going to scale that sphere so it looks more like an oval. And then from here, let's drag it up on top of our grid. Now, the next part we're going to do is going to be the engines. Now, the engines, as we discussed before, start off as a cylinder. So we'll scale this cylinder till it's about the right size that we want it, drag it up to where we want it to be, and that looks good. Now we need to flare out this bottom edge here. So the way that we can do that is if we go into vertex mode and then hold shift and select all of the vertices around this bottom edge without removing some. And boom, boom, oops. And then I lose them all because of course I do. And here, and here, and here. And click that last one. There you go. Now we have all of them selected. And if we scale this out, we'll scale it and you'll see it will flare out like the booster we're looking for. And now we need to make this 2 more times. The easiest way to do that is to just duplicate it, which we can do by if you hold shift and using your move tool here, if you drag this, I didn't want to extrude. Object mode, hold shift, and then if you drag down, you'll make a clone of the piece that you're modeling or that you've selected. So now we have 3 booster pieces for our rocket. I might want to drag this down a little bit more and drag this down a little bit more. And there we go. So that is our boosters done. Next, we'll do a porthole. So the porthole is another cylinder, which we will scale down to be kind of flat, and we'll drag it up to about the center here. Now we need to rotate this. I'm going to get us to our front view by clicking the front view there. We need to rotate this so that it's 90 degrees facing away from the rocket. Easiest way to make sure that we hit 90 degrees is to rotate this while holding J to snap rotate, which will snap by 15-degree intervals until we get to 90. And then we can move this out from here. And we obviously want to scale this down, so we'll scale this down. And that looks good. I'll move it up a little bit. Next thing we're going to do is we need to cut into this porthole to create kind of an edge and glass effect. So how we do that, we'll go into our Polycylinder 2 tab here in our attribute editor, go to our subdivision caps, and let's give it 4 caps. So now we have 4 edge loops that we can manipulate. From here, if we go to edge mode and then double click an edge, we can select the entire edge loop. And then if we go to scale and we scale it, we can push that edge loop out to, let's say, right about there. Go to the next one, double click that one, scale this out to very close to that one, or to the previous one. And then what we're going to do is we hit W to pull up our translate tool, and we're going to push this in to create that 3D edge look that we're looking for. And then finally, we're going to click on this last one, and we will scale this out a bit. And if we push this in, now we have a bubble shape for the glass. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to do the nose of the ship. Now, like I said in the first part of this, the nose was a cone. So we're going to drop a cone in. And what we're going to do here is we're going to drag it and scale it to be about where we want it to be. I'm going to scale it to there. We're going to drag it up. And right about there looks good. Maybe a bit more. All right. So now we need to round off the nose so that it's not as pointy. And the way that we do this is, again, we're going to go into our attribute editor, and we're going to add subdivisions for the height. I'm going to add 7. So now we have a bunch of different edge loops that we can manipulate. And from here, we could individually manipulate these edge loops and push them in and scale them to get this round. Or we can do another, use another tool that is a lot faster and actually gives you a lot more ability to manipulate the edges and or the vertices. And that is going to be called, or that is called soft selection. So let's go into our vertex mode and then click the tip vertex here. If you press B, you'll enter soft select mode, which soft select is, as you'll see, there's like this heat map around the mesh. Soft select will affect the vertices that are closest to the point that you've selected more than it will affect others, out until it doesn't affect anything. If you hold B and move your mouse, you can actually affect the radius at which soft select will select your vertices. What we want to do is not select the bottom ring of vertices and instead select everything else. And then if we go to our scale tool and push down, you can see that it's squashing the vertices closest to the tip point and doing less so the further out it gets. If you go to your translate tool and then push this point down, all of a sudden, we're getting closer and closer to a cap. If we do this some more, get it nice and round, and then down. And there you go. Now we have the nose for our rocket ship. Now, the last thing that we're going to do is we are going to add the fins, which is probably the most complicated part of this because it's not very clear as to what the fins start as. As I said previously, it is a cube, so we will pull out a cube, but we're going to have to manipulate this a lot to get it to bend into the shape that we want. So the first thing that we want to do with the cube is add subdivisions to its width. I'll add 11. And then let's scale this to the size and shape that we want. Something probably about there-ish, and maybe a little bit shorter. Now to get this exactly the curve that we want, we need to use deformers. So the first deformer I'm going to use is flare. We're going to go into deform, nonlinear, and add a flare. Now we have a flare handle, and from here we can affect these points. The start flare X and end flare X are the ones that we're going to use. And if you drag the handle, you can see that it's going to affect kind of where the flare, where the tips or the edges of the polygon flare in and out. Now that's okay. That looks fine. But what about or how do we get this to look more tapered, more like a point? Well, if you hit your rotator and see what happens when you rotate it all the way around, and all of a sudden, it looks way more like a fin. Okay, so now that we have our flare kind of set up, the next thing we're going to want to do is to bend that fin down into the shape that it was in the picture. So to do that, we're going to go to deform, we're going to go to nonlinear, and add a bend. Now that we have a bend handle, you can affect the curvature here to bend the edges of our cube. However, this is still not what we want, but look what happens when we rotate. Now we're getting closer. However, this is still not quite what we're looking for. If we were to increase the curvature, that's closer. Look at that. Unfortunately, it's kind of sticking out on the bottom and not exactly where we want it on the side of the ship. So if we hit W, and then if we drag our move tool in, all of a sudden, it's where we want it to be. And now we just need to manipulate this, these different handles to get the effect that we want. So if we go back to rotate, and we rotate in, it's a little bit too much. Rotate to about there. Affect the curvature there. And then we go to our flare. And let's point it in to right about there. And to right about there. And there we go. Now we have a fin. You can affect the shape of your fin using the flare and bend handles as much as you want to get the shape that you're looking for. I like where this is, so that's where we're going to leave it. The next thing we need to do is to add 3 more fins around the other parts of the rocket. So the easiest way to do that would be, as we said before, or I should say not the easiest, but a way to do it is, as we've done before, you can hold Shift and translate to create another one, or you can press Control D to duplicate it, and then you can manipulate that one separately. I don't like either of those options here because we need to make 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to do something a little different. If you, with your fin selected, if you go to Edit and then Duplicate Special, and then click this little box, we'll get this options menu. From here, what we want to do is we can create the number of copies that we want to be 3. And if we go to the rotate section here, we can actually rotate it around the pivot point 90 degrees, which is what I have it set up to. The last thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that instance is checked in the geometry type. This is important because it will allow us to manipulate each of our fins, or all of our fins at the same time. If you make copies, then they're individual copies of the shape, and they have to be manipulated one at a time. So you won't keep it as symmetrical. So now we have number of copies set to 3, the rotation in the Y set to 90, and if you click Duplicate Special, well, now we have 4 copies of our fin. Unfortunately, they're kind of rotated around the wrong point. We want them inside the rocket. Now, the way to fix this is to change the pivot point. So the pivot point is where everything starts when you manipulate and change, sculpt a shape. So that's where our handles and our widget for all of our different tools is centered right here. What we want to do is if we go into D, if you press the D key, that'll change it to pivot mode, or change the handle to pivot mode. And now you can move this pivot anywhere you want. If you press 4 to get X-ray mode, where we want to end up is right in the center. Just like we were doing before with snap turning the porthole, you can hold J and snap the pivot point until it's at the point in the center of the rocket. And then if you press 5, and then if you press D again to get out of pivot mode, now the pivot point of your fin is at the center of the rocket, which is what we want, because if we go back into duplicate special, make sure all of our settings are the same, and click duplicate special, now the fins are around the rocket. And from there, we have completed our rocket ship. The last thing that we want to do is to kind of clean up some of these rough edges and stuff. The fins and the porthole, for instance, are not smoothed, so we want to do that. And then we want to combine this mesh, or these meshes, into a single mesh so that we can export it. So let's select our porthole and our fins by shift-clicking all of the different objects. And then going up to our smooth tool and clicking smooth. Now we have a nice aerodynamic, smooth rocket. The final thing that we want to do is combine these meshes. So the way you do that, if we can shift drag to select all of the different meshes, and then we're going to go to mesh at the top here, go to booleans, and go to union. Booleans are very powerful things that allow you to add or subtract parts of meshes using other meshes. And you can do a lot of really cool stuff with them. Union is what we'll use pretty much all the time to create a single mesh out of a bunch of different parts. So when we click on that, now it is a single mesh that we can manipulate all together. And then we still have the access to manipulate the individual parts if we want to in our outliner. So that is it. That is your rocket ship. And that's the last part of the lecture for this week. I hope you guys learned a bit. For next week's lesson, we'll be going into creating lower polygon models and more optimized models so that you can use those in Unreal Engine and other game engines a lot easier without bogging down your game. So the last thing that we're going to do, of course, is we go to edit and delete all by type history. So we get rid of that. And then we can go into save to save our scene. And this is Rocket 2. Thanks, everybody. See you guys next week.